The Royals got back in the win column tonight with some big help from Michael Massey. Is he the spark that this lineup needs? Find out in this edition of Locked on Royals.
You are Locked on Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked on Royals on the Locked on Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go, one of the more fun mobile games out there. So head over to the Google Play Store or the App Store and download it today. Again, questions and comments can always be sent over to the YouTube page, or again, you can reach out to me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me, well, to sum it up quickly, I'm based here in Kansas City, work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do some co-hosting, some hosting, and some producing, so I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when you come here, when you click on this link or the icon, whatever it is, you are going to get Royals baseball in a 30-minute episode. And it's a feel-good episode tonight, as the Royals had a very impressive come-from-behind win against the Milwaukee Brewers, one of the top teams in the National League. Came in with 20 wins. And we discussed that last week with the Brewers coming in at minimum with 20 wins. I believe they grabbed one game in Chicago, so they've been slumping a little bit of late, but this is still a team that is absolutely going to be in the hunt for the NL Central crown, and I would say likely another playoff team that the Royals have had to go through in the early parts of this season. But through the first 6 innings of this game, I mean, it kind of felt a lot like some of the losses they had in this 20-game stretch or so, where the offense just isn't giving you enough. The offense isn't giving you much, and I'll be quite honest. I was out there at the game covering it tonight. A lot of angry followers in my comments, lots of angry people about this offense, and that's kind of the name of the game when you are playing meaningful baseball. I mean, I kind of hope it stays that way because it shows the investment that there is into this team. But where I will disagree with some people out there saying this is the worst lineup in baseball, the offense is terrible, it's going to be the demise of this team. Listen, some of the numbers, just the basic numbers for this offense, aren't near the bottom of the league. Like, their on-base percentage is in the bottom 10, and that is because they don't draw a lot of walks. That just has not been a part of their philosophy for a long, long time. But average, slugging, OPS, around the middle of the league. There hasn't been this drastic fall off, even in some of these bad stretches, in these slumps. The Royals offense has still done enough, whether it be the feast or famine they've been able to do, but they've been able to hang around the middle of the pack. And tonight, they've done exactly what they've done over the last 17 to 20 games. And that's getting after teams' bullpens. They may do nothing for the first 6 innings, just like tonight. Bryce Wilson, danced around danger in the first inning, didn't have great command, and then was just hitting every single spot over the final 5 innings. He got around a jam in the 6th inning in which he had 2 runners on, back-to-back walks to lead off the inning, then got Vinny Pasquantino to roll into a double play and strike out Salvador Perez. But this Royals offense has done that a lot in that stretch. They have been very quiet, non-existent, the lineup that is, through the first 5-6 innings, and they do a lot of damage late in the game. We saw that on Friday night against Texas, right? There was a 1-1 game, and they were up for 6 runs late in that game. We also saw it against Baltimore in that home series in the Friday night opener. It was, I want to say, like 2-1 or tie game, might have been 1-1, and they erupt for 7 runs or 5 runs, and they get a couple more later on. It was all the damage coming in the later innings. And to me, I mean, it's not the greatest philosophy for winning, because what happens when you get run out of the park in the first 5 innings? Well, if your offense isn't doing anything, you could be looking up at a 7-0 deficit. I remember that other Baltimore game, the Saturday game, they were down 7-0 and then did all their damage late in the game. But the fact they fell in a 7-0 deficit and were non-existent for the first 5 innings, it leads to having less chances to drive in runs, to have scoring opportunities. But I disagree with the statement that this lineup is putrid. It's atrocious. I think there are legitimate bats, and one of those guys that I think has sparked this lineup a little bit has been Michael Massey. I mean, since returning, I think we have seen the Michael Massey of the second half last year, where that power was really starting to come into play. I think that he's put together some really good at bats. I think he's got a 7 or 8 game hitting streak now, and he's sort of taken some of the streakiness, if you will, from Vinny Pasquantino. He's taken the streakiness at home from MJ Melendez, and he's been a very consistent piece now in that 5-hole. I think Matt Quatrero was very much appreciative of the fact that he can rely on the first 5 guys. I mean, the first 5 guys in the lineup, they don't interchange that much. And Michael Massey, because of this hot stretch and this power surge, he feels comfortable enough putting him in the 5-hole. Now, the 6 through 9 hitters haven't been giving you much. And I can understand the frustration and the anger coming from some of the guys at the bottom that just, aren't going to be driving in runs, may not even be hitting over 200 for quite some time. But tonight, I think it showed the resiliency once again. You had some guys come up in big time spots and just keep the line moving. We've heard that statement many times this year to pay homage, if you will, to the 2014 and 15 squad. I mean, Matt Quatrero goes to pinch hit for MJ Melendez. Nelson Velasquez gets hit by a pitch on the first pitch he saw of the at-bat. You get a first and second situation. Tyrone Blanco gets an infield single. Then Michael Garcia rips a 2-run single to take the lead. Now, Vinny Pasquantino grounded into another double play. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the bullpen, without their 3 best guys, were able to lock it down. But I'm not sure the Royals find themselves in a spot like that unless Michael Massey puts a charge into one in the 7th inning. I mean, that really seemed to wake up everything. That started that 3-run inning. And I think it showcased that, all right, the pressure's on now with Milwaukee. They had a guy coming in that had a sub-1 ERA. It was lefty. He's got a funky angle, and Michael Massey was down to his final strike, and he popped one, not completely near the fountains, but into the party porch in right center field. And that cut the lead in half, and then you felt like you were just a mistake or 2 away from being able to tie this game. And not only did they tie it, they took the lead in that inning. And Massey also had that big 3-run shot in the series finale against Toronto. I mean, another part of his game that I think you're willing to let dictate, I guess, the lineup every single night. I mean, having that power from your second baseman, that needs to be credited a little bit more to Massey. It needs to be noticed a little bit more. I mean, I had some people that were upset about the diving catch he couldn't make that eventually led to the 2-run home run by Gary Sanchez in, I think, the 4th inning. Well, Michael Massey's still a fine defender. I don't think he's one of the best in the league. But now I'm starting to look at this scenario where maybe the bat comes around enough where he becomes more of a complete player. I mean, Michael Massey was great down in the minor leagues. He was one of my favorite hitting prospects when he was making his way through AA and AAA in Omaha. I thought that there was a bat there that really could profile early on into being a pretty hitterish type of guy in the lineup. Kind of in the same way that Whit Merrifield was. It wasn't going to draw many walks, but man, when he was going really well. 2-hit Whit, as they would call him. Maybe Michael Massey could be that 2-hit guy, but right now he's kind of stepping into that power a little bit. He's already got 3 bombs on the year, and he came back a little over 2 weeks ago. He's driven in now double digits in runs. I mean, some people could make a case that Michael Massey should be in the top 3 in the order. Maybe a swap for Vinny and Massey. I wouldn't, but there's a case to be made. I mean, he's been one of the hotter guys in this lineup over the last 5, 6, or 7 games. And to me, that is really important because of what the Royals got at second base before Massey came back. And we're getting anything from Frazier. They got a couple of games from Nick Lofton in which he was a good contributor, and he's done nothing but hit since going back down to Omaha. But this is what they needed from second base. Michael Massey, to me, can be a 15 home run guy. And he doesn't hit, cheapies. He used to early on in his career. He'd get the cheap home runs, but he can also run into some. He's kind of got that that makeup, if you will. I think he's got the torque and the bat speed to be one of those second basemen that really surprises you. Not to be one of the best in the league, but somebody, at least right now, that can spark this lineup. Get it going into the bottom of the order, and hopefully somebody else picks up the heat that Michael Massey is bringing in the middle of the order. But I believe that he was the reason tonight why the Royals won that game. To be able to spark that rally in the seventh, even though home runs are rally killers, it kind of told everybody in the lineup, all right, now we go. Somebody finally got on the board. We made up for the not coming through aspect in the sixth inning. And Michael Massey immediately got things started in the seventh, that 3-run seventh that eventually led to a Royals victory. So hopefully he can be that guy moving forward to kind of provide that spark and get it on to somebody else who maybe can carry the work over to the bottom of the lineup. Who knows? But Michael Massey doing his job right now. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I'm going to talk about this trade that at least had talks, preliminary talks, didn't move much further than that, between the Kansas City Royals and the Miami Marlins for Luis Arraez. Are the Royals actually looking to improve this lineup despite being 21-15? Are they going to do it early? Are they going to wait to the deadline? Or will they do anything at all? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to a couple of the sponsors today, starting with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. It's a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at LinkedIn.com/lockedon. That's LinkedIn.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to LinkedIn.com/lockedon and get started. We also want to tell you about one of the more popular mobile games out there in Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock, and there's so much more to get, like unique stickers, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. Well, there was a report coming from Ken Rosenthal earlier this morning. It was more of an article that he did, and then MLB Trade Rumors picked it up if you follow, both those accounts online. But Luis Arraez was traded over the weekend to the San Diego Padres. Now, the Padres have a top 5 farm system in baseball, and they sent 3 top 15 prospects in their system to Miami in return, who is completely going for sell mode now. They are going to fire sale a lot of guys that have value on their team. But that was, a trade that I at least thought was going to happen a little bit later on in the season. Maybe not right up to the deadline, but I think close enough where it would have made a lot more sense. I mean, Miami's punting on the season less than 40 games in. Now, they are one of the worst teams in baseball, and I believe the second worst team in the National League, right ahead of the Rockies, because they also took a series from the Rockies. But overall, disastrous for Skip Schumacher in year 2. Now they lose their leadoff hitter, who goes to San Diego, had 3 or 4 hits in his debut with the Padres. And again, a lot of that doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is, why am I talking about Luis Arraez in the second segment of tonight's episode? Well, the Royals had called about Luis Arraez. And even though Ken Rosenthal reported that those discussions never made it past the preliminary talks, it makes you wonder. Not so much about Luis Arraez and, did the Royals really make a push for him, or was this I'm calling, here's the asking price, and then you hang up? There wasn't what if we gave you him? Maybe it was Miami was asking for too much, or the Royals were asking for maybe too little with Luis Arraez, of just, we're only going to give up this, and they said that's way too low for Luis Arraez. Who knows what really happened? But to me, it shows me that this team is very serious about trying to contend for not just the playoffs, but to win the division. And the way that the American League Central is going, with Cleveland just continuing to rack up wins, Minnesota's won 13 of 14. And the Royals, despite being 6 games over 500, are tied for second and are 2.5 back of Cleveland. They feel like if they can get this offense going, the pitching staff's going to be good enough to leverage them into 85 to 90 wins. I'm sure that's the goal for them and what they feel like is good enough to get them into the playoffs. But I know a lot of times in baseball, when you like a player or when you're talking about your team, you always look to the deadline. It's almost like we don't even think trades can happen with big-time players before that deadline in July. But this could be different. This could be a different way of operating this year with the Royals. I mean, J.J. Picollo is a transactional GM, and he has significantly improved this team despite not having many resources to do it with. I mean, he got Cole Reagans for a couple months of Aroldis Chapman. You know, early on in the season, we're talking about how he got Nelson Velasquez for Jose Cuas, but now Velasquez has kind of taken a downward turn. But that was the DH for the Royals on opening day. He had pieced together this team with what he had. Now, John Sherman gave him money to spend in the offseason, but it doesn't just stop there. And what at least was a good sign is with the Royals at least calling instead of just staying I would say idle, being content with what this team has given. I mean, a lot of GMs out there could go, we lost 106 games last year, and we're on to a really impressive streak right now. We're 6 games over 500. Nobody believed in us, and now people are starting to take notice of us. We feel fine with our roster. But that's not what it seems like J.J. Picollo is doing. This feels like a general manager. This feels like a front office that wants to continue adding to this team and be all right with pulling the plug on guys that maybe they can admit failure on. Hunter Renfroe, he did have a hit tonight, but he's still hitting below 170. And there's a lot of advanced metrics that tell you he ain't going to get much better. So, with the idea of going after Luis Arraez hasn't played the outfield in 3 years, but at least was something to keep an eye on because they're not moving anybody out of the infield. I don't see them trading for someone and then moving one of those infielders to the bench. Now, the outfield, it's a different story. And there are going to be outfielders that are available, but the fact the Royals are going for a starter, not just some platoon bat you can throw out there. I think they believe like they are a player or two away from really making this interesting. Because right now, I think there's still this doubt that this team as a collective unit is going to be able to have enough firepower to get them all the way to September and hold down a playoff spot. I mean, we are so far from September. We got months to go before we get to that point. But to me, I look at the possibility of what they would be able to give up, who they would be looking for. Our team's going to trade them a starter that's got years of control. And if they do, is it going to be a top 5 prospect in the Royals system? I mean, they felt like they really needed a bullpen piece in the offseason, and they parted ways with David Sandlin, who was a top 20 prospect in their system, for a bullpen guy. What's it going to take for an everyday player in the lineup? It could maybe cost you Caden Wallace. It could cost you a Ben Kudrna, a Frank Mozzicato. Maybe if you're really shooting high, somebody like Blake Walters, who the Royals are so enamored with. It was just interesting to me because Luis Arraez, because of his defensive liabilities, that's a pretty high bar to set. And even though those talks did not make it very far, it does pique your interest. Are the Royals going to be shopping around for the next couple weeks? Are they already on to their next piece of who they think they're going to trade for? Because to me, I think it would be a little foolish to be going after Luis Arraez and saying, okay, we barely got anything on that. We're not going to go after anybody now. It kind of feels like this would be a pivot mode of maybe they feel like, no, if Hunter Renfroe can't cut it in the month of May, maybe you do have to admit defeat on that signing and go after somebody who can be a consistent piece. Because Hunter Renfroe is not cutting at the plate, and aside from his arm, he's not really doing much in the field. And can they find somebody out there like a Taylor Ward, who's playing for the Angels? Could they find somebody like a Charlie Blackmon in Colorado? Guys that you would probably play every day. These are things that we're going to have to keep our eye on, but I'm pretty shocked that the Royals were going to be shooting that high, at least enough to get a call to Miami, to call someone that might be in an open fire set. One that intrigued me because I got brought up this question in a mailbag Friday, I think it was, and I think I kind of scoffed at it at first, but I kind of want to rewind to that point and give a better answer. I mean, the White Sox are going to be significant sellers. I mean, they are going to trade just about anybody that can give them a slight return. And with the way the Royals operated and with as much Royals influence there is in Chicago, I mean, do you pull the trigger if Eloy Jimenez becomes available and you want to really have some thunder in your lineup, even though there's the injury concerns? I mean, do you want Eloy Jimenez or Nelson Velasquez at the DH? It's just maybe you could get Eloy Jimenez for cheap. Tommy Pham's been great since being in Chicago. Do you kick the tires on Tommy Pham? I mean, these are all things that I'm going to be looking out for now that we know the Royals were at least making calls this early on with a good record to continue bolstering their lineup. Do you think the Royals are going to make a trade before the deadline? Let us know in the YouTube comments or let me know on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we move on to our final segment, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring in the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. To wrap up our show, I got to vent a little bit. I think challenges in baseball are the stupidest thing about the game. And there's a lot of stupid things that baseball has added in. This has to top the list for me. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we move on to our final segment, a final shout out to one of our sponsors today in Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and the data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination producing holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Well, as I said earlier in tonight's show, I was out at Kauffman Stadium and got to take in the game from the press box, went down afterwards, got to speak to Matt Quatrero, and then we got to talk to the players in the post game. So, again, a very busy and full night, which is why I'm bringing this podcast episode so late in the evening. But I also wanted to save the final segment today to vent about something that I believe to be the dumbest thing in the sport of baseball, and that is replays. That is challenges. More so challenges than replays. So, the Brewers in the 8th inning, the Royals went with Tyler Duffy and Will Smith because Angel Serpa, John Schreiber, and James MacArthur clearly were not available. But it was Jackson Chourio, I believe, that decided to steal third base, or attempt to steal third base, and Salvador Perez threw him out. Now, it was a bang-bang close play right where Angel Hernandez was standing. And I had my doubts whether Angel Hernandez was going to get the call right or not, but the Brewers hadn't challenged earlier in the game. So here goes Pat Murphy to challenge for the first time. And the way baseball, I felt like, was going to set this up when they allowed replays was you were going to get one challenge. If you failed, you couldn't challenge again. But here we are in the 9th inning, and a double play ball with Willy Adames at the plate. It's another bang-bang play. Really close. To the human eye, 50-50. But with replay, it's going to give us a better angle. Now, the Brewers lost their challenge in the 8th inning. The call on the field stood. It wasn't confirmed. It wasn't overturned. Just stood. Not enough evidence. Okay, so the Brewers and Pat Murphy lose their challenge. And then in the 9th inning, this double play, gets made by Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Massey, and Vinny Pasquantino. And I look down in the dugout. Pat Murphy, he's down there again, and he's looking to his bench coach. Should I challenge or not? And then he gives the headset signal. But here's what's funny about it. The Brewers don't have a challenge, right? But what we've been able to tell is that if you lose a challenge, you are able to suggest to the umpires, you should look at it. It's an umpire review. Let me give a suggestion that we think it's close. Why don't you look at it? Right? And to me, it's the dumbest thing about baseball. Just have two challenges. Okay, that completely get rid of umpire review. Because what happened is you gave the Brewers another opportunity to pause everything, hold the hand up, look back, and then say, we want to check. No, let me take that back. We want you to take a little look at that. We feel like this play could have gone either way. Why don't you talk amongst yourselves? Let's hear from New York and see what they have to say. So what's the penalty of challenging? I mean, really, I'm surprised more managers haven't just willy-nilly challenged in the eighth inning, whether they know or not, because if it happens again in the ninth inning, they can challenge again. I mean, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous that this has not been figured out, right? This has not been handled properly, in my opinion. This completely ruins the idea of challenging. I mean, if you get one and you get it right, you keep it. But even in that eighth inning, when the runner was thrown out at third base, the umpiring crew said to the crowd, Milwaukee is out of challenges. They lose their challenge. Well, no, they didn't, because they get the umpire review in the ninth. And I thought, at least in the beginning, what the umpire review would be, if there was a bang-bang play, that umpire immediately goes, let's review it. I just want to be sure I didn't get the best angle. I'm going ahead with this. I am going to call myself out and say, let's get a review. That, to me, is what I thought an umpire review would be. Instead, it just gives the other team another chance to challenge. And that, to me, is dumb. That to me, is the stupidest rule in baseball, more so than the ghost runner. If you are pro robot umpires, it's dumber than not having robot umpires. I would even say, the mound visits thing. Some people that are more old school think it's dumb. Why do we need to speed up the game? The pitch clock, you may think is stupid. To me, the replays and challenges the dumbest thing that we have, because it's so up in the air. It feels like there's no fine line. Hey, you lose this challenge, you can't challenge again. And if we're wrong, so be it. You lost your challenge. That's the gamble you have of trying to overturn a call in a big-time spot. And that's why I'm glad, at least with the Royals and Bill Duplessis, who's been so good in that role, the Royals don't just willy-nilly challenge a lot of the times, unless it's the last out of the game. And it was might as well. We lose it, the game's over. Right? But if we're right, we keep playing. To me, it felt like the Brewers and Pat Murphy just willy-nilly challenged in the runner going to third situation. Now, you could make a good case he was safe, but it wasn't so clear and convincing that was going to be overturned. Same with the double play. Just wasn't a great angle. And to me, those were the willy-nilly challenges of why not? You're taking too long. I'm just going to say challenge. The Royals are a little bit more, clean and concise with it. We've seen a couple of teams so far this year that have challenged and been incorrect, and the Royals have been wrong before because they feel like they were right, and maybe it wasn't the buzzer, and Bill Duplessis said it's worth the challenge. But why not just be worth the challenge all the time? It's an automatic gimme. It's a buffer. You'll have another one. There's no fine line of, well, what if the umpires deny you? They never do. The umpires never deny a crew chief review. They just do it anyway. So now we're stopping the game again. I mean, my goodness, Pat Murphy stopped the game about as much as he could in the final 3 innings. He had 3 pitchers in the 8th inning. He had a mound visit in which he didn't even take out a pitcher. I think in the 6th inning, 2 challenges. It just went on and on and on. But baseball's got to clean that up. Baseball's got to fix that, because that, to me, makes no sense. If somebody does have a real good explanation that isn't just from right in the rule book of why you can do this, explain to me why you can't just say you have one challenge, and if you're wrong, you're done. The crew chief Just have 2 challenges. Don't even have a crew review. Why? There's no need to. It's the same thing. There was no difference. Pat Murphy looked into his dugout, gave them the challenge headset again, and they had to go do the same exact thing. Just have 2 challenges. Stop having one saying they're out of challenges and they get another challenge. It's confusing to fans who don't get to watch the game that much or are not as familiar with the rules. It's stupid. Absolutely stupid, in my opinion. But that's the rant I needed to do. If you feel the same way or you want to let me know, go to the YouTube page or let me know on Twitter. But as for tonight, that is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to take a little bit more of a deeper dive into its offense and why I feel like some of these struggles may continue, but also let's not overreact to how bad this offense may be. Things should be looking up at this point in time, and if they do, is the team that can really take off. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.